Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Orange Team podcast. We've got a great show for you today, including everything from AI heists to where have all the netbooks gone. So let's jump right in. Hello, and welcome. This is the Orange Team podcast. I'm Mitch. Joining me is Leighton, and we have a lot to talk about today.
Yes, we do. First off, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good. Just got back from a trip to Denver, Colorado. I don't know if there's another Denver, but that was a very, very lovely little vacation. Got to see a mutual friend of ours and see the Rocky Mountains, which was very, very fun.
Very cool. What was it saying? Very cool. Was it cold there?
Actually, it wasn't. There was snow on the ground, but I think the average was 60 degrees for the high during the day. We did go up into the mountains a little bit, and I had a jacket on for that trip, but it really wasn't that cold. But right after I left, it snowed the next day. Pretty crazy amount of snow, so that was awesome.
Wow.
Just missed it.
That's awesome. I was in the exact opposite. I was out in the desert this weekend.
Really? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, going out with a group of guys, just camping and riding off rotors, and had brought our three-wheeler out there, and just it's just nice just to get away and just enjoy some good weather. It was raining at our house, so it was nice to be out in the desert, just where it's nice and cool and dry, or warm and dry.
Yeah. It can be shockingly cold in the desert, but I know what you mean. Just kind of getting away from the inclement weather and off-roading and stuff. That's good times.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was really good. So yeah, no, it's been fun. And so Mitch, what are we talking about today? Get right into it.
So yeah, let's start in with our first topic, which is AI heists. So this was sent in to me by a friend, and the article I'm using to reference what's going on here is an Ars Technica article, but I'm sure this isn't the only article on the web you can find. The title is "Deepfake Scammer Walks Off with $25 million in a first-of-its-kind AI heist."
That's wild.
So here's what happened. It gets really wild. This was a firm in Hong Kong where somebody called in, and this somebody, even on a video call, was using deepfake technology to wear the face of the company's CFO. And it gets even more complicated because it wasn't just one scammer wearing the face of the CFO. There were multiple other people playing the parts of other employees at the company and wearing all of their faces as they proceeded to request this money over the video call. Now, details are a little scarce because Hong Kong police are still actively investigating. But as a podcast that has already talked about AI at least once, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it over and over and over, because that's just the world we live in. Leighton, how do you feel about the first heist using AI and deepfakes?
Well, so my first thought goes back to my background. For those who don't know, I got a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, and the thing that I learned from my time in that school was that the way hacking works is not the way you see it in the movies. It's not some sweaty guy with a hoodie in the van typing in lines of code, just breaking into the mainframe. It's usually some form of social engineering. And, there's been a lot of different ways social engineering has been done over the past, decade, 2 decades even. And most of the time we can kind of find ways to train people to look for the telltale signs, some of the things they're asking for, the way they do things. But this, in my mind, is taking it to another level. This is a cybersecurity expert's worst nightmare because the hardest thing to lock down isn't the computers, it's the people working for the company. And when you can convince people that you are someone at a certain level in the company, at this, and right now it's at its rudimentary level and it just fooled someone, just wait 2 more years. This is scary. This is crazy that they've pulled this off. And of course, now with this article out, it's going to inspire many copycats to push the envelope.
That's the problem, isn't it? Because proving that it's possible is going to encourage people to say, oh, it's already worked once. Maybe we can make it happen. Or even just for the thrill. Like, because this is kind of all of this AI technology, deepfakes, generative AI, ChatGPT, they're all still incredibly novel and interesting. And people engage with them just because it's so crazy to be able to carry on a conversation with a computer. It's a dangerous combination to have that kind of novelty, but with that, with the ability for it to go sideways, and be used for evil, for lack of a better word, so easily.
Mm-hmm.
This is fascinating, and I think the question becomes, where do we go from here? So we just had the first AI heist, like you were saying. It comes down to social engineering, and it comes down to people being the weak points in the chain. We've had emails from, like the Ugandan president going back to the 90s where they say, hey, send me $5,000, I'll send you 5 million. Like, that was one form of social engineering scam, and fairly easy to see through, although a shocking number of people were still taken in by them. But now we're getting to the point where you could, over a video call, look someone in the eyes and see whoever they want you to see. And that is terrifying.
It is. And
So
yeah, I'm just,
where do we go from here?
yeah, my mind is racing thinking of ways you can combat this. And there are definitely some ways I think you can do it. But a lot of it's going to involve just, especially at these big companies, right? Like small time companies and every, mom and pop type things, it's going to be a little trickier. And I think they're already some of the more vulnerable people because they don't have the infrastructure to fight some of the stuff. But big companies do. And I think some of them, it just involves, obviously training, right? If you're getting a video call or even an audio call requesting things, I think it needs to have certain levels of authentication that supersede calls. It needs to have some form of like in-person validation. This kind of stuff, weirdly enough, so there's been an uptick in work from home. And a lot of people have been mad
Right.
because a lot of companies are trying to get people to come back to the office. And depending upon your position, I don't think that's necessary, but I think what this is going to encourage is that there are certain positions that just cannot work from home. Even if it seemed like that kind of work could have been done from home before, the security risk is going to get too high, and they're going to start bringing people back to the offices because that physical means of like seeing a person face to face and confirming like, yes, I need this money moved versus over an email or a video call. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I think of because otherwise it's going to involve some form of secondary or this like 2-factor, it might be 3-factor authentication. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's because, or like, if you initiate that kind of transfer, it actually sends a message to the people that realistically have that kind of level of authentication so that they can, obviously if someone's hacked so deep down the rabbit hole, maybe they can intercept that email and do stuff. But I just feel like it should,
or like 24-hour holds on the funds, right? Kind of like cash registers, or what is it, like safes at fast food restaurants. Sometimes it'll say, hey, we can't get money out of the safe. We can start that process, but it takes X number of hours for the safe to actually open,
Yeah,
and that's their chance to intercept it.
what all this does is it's going to slow a lot of things down. And that's really like, people wonder why companies take so long to do certain things. This is one of those reasons. There's many reasons, but one of the reasons is the level of security and authentication and authorization that has to happen before certain decisions can get made in companies, especially when there's millions of dollars on the line. This is just going to be another step, another thing that has to, more security people have to be hired, which is going to cost companies more and more. Steps are going to have to be made before things can be done, and more, authorization and more. So things are just going to have to slow down so that they can make sure that things are done right. When I worked, a few companies I've worked for, they've, one of the main things they do is they send out these fake, the tech team will send out emails pretending to be scammers, but also who are pretending to be legit. And they try to see how many people in their company will get caught in their honeypot. And I think they're going to have to come up with new honeypot scenarios with this kind of stuff. And
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, because I don't think we can fight it with other technology. Some people keep saying, "Oh, we'll need AI to detect if it's AI," but like all that's going to do is help them train better AI. It's just a never-ending war of AI versus AI. I think,
You
yeah.
you talk about a honeypot though, but there's a difference between a text email saying send me 5,000 and I will send you 5 million, and being on a video call looking the CFO of your company in the eyes while the other seemingly other accountability members on the team are also on the call.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's different.
It is, but I think
Um,
that just means procedure is going to have to change. If you can transfer
yeah,
$25 million by being on a video call with the right people, and that's all it takes, then that's probably
that's a good point.
not the right policy. You know, so
Yes. There may have been a failure in procedure further down the line. Yeah.
right. I mean, even before AI, if you just somehow were able to find someone who could mimic their voice well enough, because I mean, here's the thing too with video chats is you could like fake compression. You can add fake
Yeah,
compression
true.
to make it look a little worse, so that some of the imperfections don't sound, aren't as noticeable. If they're a good voice actor,
Right.
and you put like whether it be like it could be just like a Snapchat filter type thing, or it could be, actual prosthetic makeup. Like people who are willing to heist $25 million, they're not like your small time scammers. They're people that actually are willing to throw some money into it and make it happen because you're going after the big fish.
Yeah.
So people are determined, but AI has just made it easier. And because most of these tools are actually fairly open source and free, if you know what you're doing, it's like, yeah, there's money to be made. Now, I'll be interested to see the follow up to this and see what they find out. I'm sure there'll be other tech people talking about this kind of stuff too.
I feel like we are not far off from smart mirrors in like beauty salons and things where you're going to see yourself reflected in the smart mirror, but it's obviously a processed image with like a high quality webcam pointed at you, where you'll be able to cycle through maybe the different options, the things that they can do. Oh, we could cut your hair like this, or we could dye it, or we could whatever. And leveraging deepfake technology to actually see in real time what that would look like on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
And I think that that's, this is an odd scenario because it's sort of like the sky's the limit. As many different ways as we could think of where people might want to look differently at the press of a button or preview maybe what, that particular cosmetic surgery would look like or whatever. Imagine having that power baked right into the smart mirror that's just showing you what you might end up looking like. That's fascinating to me.
it is fascinating, and I think that's definitely one of the more innocent uses of it. And there's loads of
True.
interesting ways that AI can be used. And that's the thing, like you mentioned how it's being used for evil, but like most things usually start out for good. Like most of the stuff that gets turned into, I mean, look at the internet. The internet is one of the most amazing tools ever, and yet it has done some of the greatest harm. I mean, this heist, it wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for the internet and the tools and the things that are done. So on one hand, the greatest good can be used for the greatest evil. So that's the thing we kind of get stuck with, is this quandary of, do we keep going down the path because of the potential good, or do we feel like somehow we're going to overcome these evils, or is it just going to keep creating new ones? It's like a hydra. Wherever you cut one head off, two more pop up, and that's, we don't know. We're going into the unknown. There's so many new things around the corner. We're 2024. We've got AI absolutely just steamrolling ahead, or I don't know if steamrolling is that the right term. Anyway, it's just going full bore ahead.
Steam, like Gabe Newell steam?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
It's going full ahead, and then you've got this new technology. My mind goes to the Vision Pro right now because I've been watching a bunch of videos of people using them now, and
Yeah.
the stuff that's coming around the corner, man. It's like we're entering that somewhat of the future we saw in Star Trek, but also not exactly how we pictured it. So I don't know, man. It's
Right.
interesting. I'm excited but terrified at the same time.
Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned the Vision Pro. I know that the Vision Pro has tech built into it to sort of give you an awareness of your surroundings. Like if somebody walks into frame, they will then be projected into your digital space so that you can see, hey, there's a person in the room with you right over here. The question becomes how much of that is just pass through, which is just showing you a camera feed of real life, and how much of that is something being processed and then presented to you as like CGI, for lack of a better word, voxels or what have you to represent the person. If it's the latter, that then represents a vector of attack, where what if malware gets in there and maybe makes you see something different than what is really in the room with you or whatnot. We're rapidly developing technology to separate us further and further from reality, like VR headsets, the Vision Pro, even to a degree, I think, like smart cars. The day is fast approaching where nobody will know how to drive because they'll just sit in their car and tell them, hey, take me from here to there. And it will do it, and it will do it safely. But as we further abstract ourselves from reality, that requires us to still be able to ground ourselves in it. And what if we get so deep in like a virtual reality headset or whatnot, where what we thought was reality via the video pass-through or whatnot actually isn't, and we're actually trapped in a prison, maybe of our own design. Like, there's a sci-fi story here, and I can
Black
I
Mirror.
can see the edges of it. Black Mirror, yeah, we're getting into full-on Black Mirror territory.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I saw a
boy.
video earlier. It was like Simpsons did it, and it was showing a bunch of people with VR headsets walking around, Springfield, and falling into things, and crashing into things, and it's like, I just watched the Casey Neistat video where he literally walked around New York wearing this headset,
Right.
and I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, he's doing it to be funny, but he's kind of like, that's not that far off. Like, we laughed. I remember when the first iPhone was announced, and it was pretty high tech, but it was also one of those things where like, that's kind of like, are people going to use that? Like, it seems kind of wild. And now it's like every phone is basically based off the iPhone, Android or otherwise.
Yeah.
It's used that same basic design. So, and same Apple introduced the iPad. It's now the the biggest tablet in the world, and the smartwatches, Apple Watch, Vision Pro. Now we had, Meta, but, I don't know. Yeah, and then like what you're right, like what it's not like it's giving us true like AR where you see out into the world and then it just puts things in it. It's like it's camera feed, like you said. They can convince you of anything.
They can be hacked.
It can be hacked. It can be, but even if it's not just hacked, it could just literally people get so comfortable. Like in 10 years, people might be so comfortable with that technology that they trust it, and like even it doesn't even have to be a hacking. It just has to be even a some form of new software we can't think of right now, like, how Facebook came around and Uber came around. They're all technologies that we couldn't fathom before. Well, what happens when these headsets are so common and, some app comes out that just absolutely consumes everything, like TikTok, but something new. Yeah. And we just be like, man, it's going to be Ready Player One. It's Ready Player One is around the corner.
100%.
The next Fortnite won't be Fortnite. It'll be something like it, but
IRL,
all the kids are putting on headsets and are just consumed by Second Life, but on steroids. For young people, Second Life used to be this thing, online world.
Second Life.
Well, it's still around, but it's not. It's not like when we were younger. Like it was way bigger.
No, but it's shockingly large. Like the amount of money they still turn over every month is staggering.
Yeah.
Like the whole concept of, I think Second Life kind of pioneered the concept of digital real estate. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of that digital real estate's still real estating. You know what I mean? For lack of a better word, real estating. I don't know, man. You mentioned a couple of things though that piqued my interest. One of which was the launch of the iPhone. And how, phones have kind of grown to fill this larger role in our lives that we couldn't have anticipated then. That's something I've been thinking about lately, actually. And there's one device in particular that really exemplifies this for me. And I'm wondering if you ever had one or really remember them. Do you remember the netbooks?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, well, I never had one, but boy, do I remember them for two reasons.
Okay.
One, because we had, I think, a couple friends who had them, And so I remember being like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. We're playing like Minecraft on this thing, or playing, Age of Empires on these tiny things. But also
Yep.
because we used to work at Best Buy and I had to sell the darn
Yep.
things. Um, but yeah, those were a big deal. And yeah, you don't hear much about netbooks anymore, do you?
So I've done a little digging because exactly the same story as you described. I had a netbook around in that era. I think it was my dad had bought it and then it wasn't quite enough for him, so it kind of handed down to me. And yes, I could play Minecraft on it, sort of. I could play very basic games on it, sort of. But they represented a moment in time. They're like time capsules. That was an era where we saw the iPhone launch around the same time as netbooks were rising to prominence. We saw maybe the first iPad around that same era. There was a time where our computing devices kind of filled distinct roles in our lives. Like, you didn't want a device that did everything necessarily, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more later. But a netbook filled one very specific role, and that was a tiny little computer that you could browse the web and check emails and respond to emails from, and maybe do some word processing. Very, very specific. I will say that a netbook was also my first exposure, I think, to Linux, which was fun because that was being such a lightweight, weak device, sometimes running Linux on it just made more sense because that's a more performant operating system. But, netbooks were small and cheap, and they did one thing, and they did one thing really well. I feel like netbooks, and I don't have a ton of evidence to support this, but just kind of looking at it, it sort of makes sense. They kind of left the scene as tablets entered the scene because tablets represented sort of a portable little computing device that might be capable of doing more, but without a baked in keyboard, it's kind of difficult, right? And so, again, if you're just browsing the web or whatnot, a tablet makes sense. I have a theory. I think that netbooks are not actually dead and gone. And I think that they're actually more common than maybe they were at the peak of their popularity. And I want to see if you can guess, what has the netbook evolved into?
I'm trying to think of things that fall into that kind of category.
Don't look at the notes because I may have written it.
Yeah, because I mean, my first thought would have been like a tablet. But yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't quite fit the niche. Um, okay, might have it. So, and I'll explain why I think I know this, because my mom's a school teacher, and they
Okay.
use these a lot in schools now. And I think what
Okay.
you're going at is Chromebook.
Aha. You got it.
Okay,
Okay.
let me check the
So,
notes. Oh yes, answer
yeah.
key.
So, answer key. Yeah. Make sure. Check. So, I think you were right. Like a tablet with a Bluetooth keyboard, kind of the same role, kind of the same size. 10. We have 10-inch tablets. That's like the standard size now. And I think the netbooks were like 11 inches at the time. But I feel like in terms of a device that is strictly a portal into the internet connected digital realm, Chromebook fills that role today. And that kind of raises a question in my mind, at least, because very clearly there is still a place for netbooks in the computing landscape. Is it possible that the first attempt at netbooks simply suffered from a marketing issue? Because Google obviously has a lot of money and a large established user base that for them to be able to say, hey, we want to build a device for you where you don't have to worry about viruses, you don't have to worry about any crazy nonsense like incompatible drivers or whatever. You just buy this cheap little Chromebook and we'll give you access to the internet. I mean, that is what the netbook was, period.
Yeah, but I think so. I don't know if it was a marketing issue as much as it was just a technology issue. Because you think about when netbooks were becoming a thing, the internet was still growing. It wasn't quite as fast and robust, and people didn't have it wasn't as accessible yet. I mean, we still take for granted that like today we can get good internet just about anywhere. If you can get Starlink or you can get cell service somewhere, you can get pretty good internet now. Whereas
Yeah.
back then there was still a lot of people on dial-up. There's still a lot of people even on broadband who are only getting like 8 to 20 megabits per second was considered fast. So,
Right.
and Google wasn't making desktop operating systems. Windows was just literally throwing like a full-blown Windows onto a machine that barely had the hardware to run Windows. So I think Google really what they just did was they saw an opportunity and they were like, hey, Microsoft stuffed this up. We can do this better because we have a really lightweight operating system. Essentially, what a Chromebook is, it's just a browser operating system.
Yeah.
Because browsers are essentially an operating system virtual machine at this point. They run programs inside each tab. When you open Google Doc, when you open, YouTube or a lot of programs are web apps. And so you're running little mini programs, mini applications in your browser. So Google's like, well, why not just, as long as you have an internet connection, you essentially have all the apps you need. And since the internet is now more robust, it's more viable. So I think it was just more technology. Microsoft was, and this is a Microsoft thing to do. They have these great ideas, but they jump on them way too early, and then when they don't make money, they leave. And then someone else comes along, and the technology is actually at the right place, and they succeed where Microsoft failed. You look at like a lot of Microsoft phones, for example, that was kind of the case.
The Microsoft phone was so cool.
Oh.
Like, I wanted one. The friends who had one, incredible experience.
Great phones. Don't get me wrong. I actually think they were really ahead of their time, but just didn't. They certain things they didn't quite hit. The things that were really important, like app support and things like that, came in a bit late. But you look at. I mean, Microsoft had the Surface tablets, and they were way more capable than an iPad as far as like what you could run on them, but they didn't take off the same way iPads did.
Did you ever actually see a Zune in the wild?
Yes.
Okay.
Our mutual
Sometimes
friend
I
of
wonder
ours
if I was
had
the
one.
only one. Oh, okay, that must have been that was probably where I saw it too. I feel like I saw another one from the camp that we used to work at. I feel like somebody had a Zune hooked up to the sound system in the kitchen there.
Yeah, I mean they had it in
and I remember
Guardians 3.
I was just like, this is the Zune, like I had never seen one.
Yeah.
And so I was just staring at it like, can I touch it? Can I mess with it?
It's so funny because even if Microsoft had somehow gained market share in that, they would have lost it anyway because the whole iPod market's no longer around. It's all smartphones. So it was really not a bad thing that they didn't take off because it really wouldn't have, done much for them in the long run. But yeah, it's interesting that you were saying though about the technology of the netbooks moving, and how that's shifted. Do you have it? I mean, you've heard what I had to say. Do you have any more like feelings on that matter? Like where do you think it's all gone?
So this is complicated, and you mentioned how there really isn't a place for the iPod anymore. I'm not convinced that there isn't. So I've noticed this trend in computing in general, where we have been squishing all of our devices down into what I call like an every device. So consider the fact that your iPhone can do everything. We are recording this podcast on iPhones. You know what I mean? The webcam is our iPhone. And theoretically, we could be recording the audio on it too. If we wanted, GarageBand's right on the iPhone. I could get some form of audio editing software on there. Like, we could hook up a lightning to USB adapter and plug in a microphone. So it used to be that devices filled very specific roles. And one place in computing where you still see that is gaming consoles. Like an Xbox or a PlayStation is really designed to only do one thing, and only do one thing well. And as a result, because they're not trying to be a jack of all trades, usually they can do that one thing pretty well. Like, you don't need the same kind of processor or graphics. I think the Xbox is on an APU now. And I think that maybe they have been since the 360. and back when APUs weren't altogether that powerful and would not have necessarily been enough to sustain a full-on gaming experience. Um, because of the focus, they were able to cut out anything they didn't need, make it as cheaply and effectively as possible, and you had your Xbox, which played games, and it played them very well. Nowadays, everything has to be able to do everything. And in the words of Syndrome in The Incredibles, when everyone's super, no one will be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we live in a world where every device has to be able to do everything. I have to be, I don't want to send an email from my Apple Watch. Fortunately, and because I had written that into the notes, not wanting to send emails from my Apple Watch, I had to go check because I honestly did not know if I could somehow. I don't think I can, fortunately. But that's about as absurd as it gets, right? Like, your Apple Watch, smartwatches are awesome. It's a watch, but it has a little bit of added functionality. If I get a text and I want to check whether or not that text is worth pulling my phone out of my pocket and responding, I just look at my watch and I see, oh, that's from my wife. I better respond right away. Or I see, oh, that's from my coworker. He's not talking about something burning down, so I must not need to respond right this second. You know what I mean? And I can go about my business. The Apple Watch also represents a device that I think by its very nature cannot be in every device. But there are some apps on my Apple Watch that surprise me. There is an app store, which of course there is because you'd have to get your apps for whatever, but it's just kind of surprising to me that there is an app store just for the Apple Watch. Most of the apps end up being ways to connect the data from the app into what they call the complications on the watch face. So like, oh, if I wanted to get stock prices right there, I'd have to install the app and then the complications available. That's a little bit different, I think. And I think that Apple still understands that devices kind of need roles in order to excel. But there was a moment, and still is sort of a moment in time in technology, where imagine that my wife needed a new device, right? That she's going to browse the web, she's going to listen to YouTube, she's going to listen to our podcasts, things of that nature. What do I buy for her? What direction do I point her in? Do I say get a MacBook? Do I say get a Chromebook? Do I say get a tablet? Do I say just get an iPhone Pro Max with the bigger screen? To some degree, all of those are kind of viable answers to the core, the fundamentals of computing. And I don't... What do you think? Like, do you identify what I see where the lack of differentiation and distinct roles for tech may come back to bite us here in the future?
I agree to a certain extent that it is annoying. Like, for example, like how smart TVs are a great example of this. It is nice that TVs have all that functionality, but there's also, you can buy the streaming sticks, and then, yeah, like you buy an Xbox can do just about everything the smart TV can do. Or like, it seems like every device can do everything, like you said. And so I don't like the idea that the TV is smart, because it means it's actually going to depreciate, or not depreciate, but literally become unusable faster. Because it has a processor that will eventually be unable to keep up with updates, or won't get updates because it's not strong enough to handle the newest
Right.
newest content that's coming out, the new codecs that it needs to stream and stuff like that. And that's annoying. Now, I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe I can bypass the menu and just go straight to a streaming stick. But like, to me, it just kind of defeats the purpose. Like, I'd rather just have a TV that just turns on, and just whatever my input is, it feeds that in. And like, my parents have a TV that's 8 or 9 years old, still runs great.
The number of times that I've wanted to sit down and just watch something with my family, and I get these little blip pop-ups on the TV that, hey, your TV needs to update. I'm like, why in the world does my TV have to update
Right.
in order for me to just watch, and we use a Roku for most things. I'm confident the Roku has had to update, but I also cannot recall a time where the Roku updating interfered with our evening. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I
So,
get that. Like in like my TV though, like I want to open an app and be like, oh, this app needs an update. I'm like, why didn't it do it while I wasn't there? The TV's always on in a sense. It's like a standby mode.
yep.
It could be updating in the background. So
Yep.
yeah, it's just it seems like even though it's adding convenience, it is also
Maybe.
adding well, no, I mean it kind of is in the sense like I mean, you got to remember like I have to remind myself like I am a tech savvy person and
Right.
I don't need a lot of these things that these companies are trying to sell me because I know how to work around them and I know how to handle them. But
Mm-hmm.
then I have to think of my wife and my mom and my dad and like different people who are not as tech savvy and I have to help them with everything. My mom doesn't even know how to turn on their TV anymore because
Right.
it's just so like well partially I mean even though it's an old TV like the remotes have gone out so I had to get new remotes and the new remotes are way weirder and more complicated. And so
Yeah.
it's frustrating that like it's yeah I'm trying to think of like where I was going with this but you were asking about my thoughts on consolidation right
Yeah.
and
Like everything's approaching this black hole esque event horizon. Almost like, and I'll be honest, Star Trek, I think, alluded to this ideal future where, regardless of where you are on the ship, if you're on the bridge and you've got your little terminal there and you're, tactical or you're engineering or whatever, you can kind of access anything from anywhere.
mm-hmm,
And there's like a freedom for that, but then why have an engineering section if I could be monitoring and managing engineering from my quarters or from the holodeck or from the mess hall? Like it's obviously there has to be some point at which it's like, oh, I can't actually access that subsystem from the replicator in the mess hall, so I'm gonna have to go down to engineering and deal with it, right? You would think, but very frequently that's the future that they portray on Star Trek.
yeah yeah I think what's led us here is just the word convenience and that's why I brought it up earlier is because I think everyone wants everything to do everything I mean it seems like there is a demand for it because other people keep buying it but at the same time yeah it's I don't know like my I don't know. I agree. Like it's frustrating.
I
Everything does everything. Like I mean, like we were talking about the iPhones, for example. Yes,
I'm gonna sound like old man yells at cloud, right? Like I don't want my everything to do everything, but I I still personally feel like there are obvious front runners and clear choices for specific purposes. If I need to be connected on the go, that's what my phone is for. If it's an environment where I would have my phone, but I'm planning to be there for a while and I want to be able to maybe watch a movie I've queued up, that's what a tablet's for. If I'm going to be working on my novel manuscript on the go, that's what a MacBook or a laptop is for. Something with an affixed keyboard and maybe a better battery life as a result. If I'm planning to do some gaming, well, I'm either going to have a gaming desktop or a gaming specific console. I appreciate and have enjoyed simple games on my iPhone or maybe my tablet. There's certain games like Bloons TD6, which is that tower defense game that runs on everything. Minecraft runs on everything. There have been times where it's simply because we had so many people who wanted to play and not enough devices that I would be playing Minecraft on my phone and my daughter on the tablet and my son on the Xbox and my wife on my computer and the friends who had came over on their phones. There, I'm not altogether writing off the idea of multi-purpose devices, but putting ourselves in the shoes of a salesman at Best Buy, what criteria would we have narrowed down on back in our day, trying to point a person in the right direction? If they just came and said, "Hey, I need to browse the web and send some emails," was it like
I think,
Would it have come down to how we felt on a given day?
yeah,
Like, oh, I'll point you at a tablet. I'll point you at a laptop.
there is preference. I mean, there was even preference when I worked there, about what computers. And I always tried to
Yeah.
point people to better computers, not because I was trying to upsell them, because I didn't get any commission, but, just
Yeah.
because I didn't want them to have a bad experience. And I have to work hard with certain people to convince them to spend. And I'm not asking them to double it. I'm sometimes just asking them to spend like $100 more. And it will make a world of difference versus spending the cheapest, money on the cheapest computer. I do.
Double it and pass it to the next person.
I think that we're seeing like a bit of a consolidation, but I was thinking about it while we are talking, and how to a certain extent though we're sitting at this precipice where certain devices, they want so badly to do everything, and yet we still have the devices in those categories for a reason. And I'm going to use Apple as another example, because for all intents and purposes it feels like Apple wants the iPad to be the computer. Like, it just feels like they've added just about almost everything you can. I mean, you can use mouse and keyboard support on it now. You can run full on like DaVinci Resolve video editing and Logic Pro, like all the high end consumer devices. It's got USB-C, so you can plug in hubs to it and like external hard drives and whatever devices you want. All you need is like to add a keyboard to it, and then you literally have a laptop. And yet, for some reason, they still sell laptops, because
Right.
at the end of the day, the iPad just can't replace the laptop. People still want to have a dedicated device with a physical keyboard that's always there, bigger battery, more power, bigger screen, and then they just don't. You know what I mean? It does things that the iPad can't do. And I think even if the iPad could run full Mac apps, it still wouldn't be as good as a MacBook. Maybe a MacBook
Right.
Air. I think that's the closest. But if you want a MacBook Pro, it just doesn't connect as well. And then you've got the iPhone even. iPhone, I'll tell you this. I don't like responding to emails on my phone. Maybe it's a bit of a boomer thing.
Right.
I just don't like typing on my phone. I prefer to use my phone for
A
calls.
boomer thing.
Because I mean, some people like just love to type on. They text and email, and I'm just like, I hate it. I'm like, I'll wait to get to a computer before I respond to an email. I mean, even like my messaging, like I love the fact that I can respond to text messages on my computer, because I can respond so much faster on a keyboard than I can try to type with my thumbs, because I have to rely on autocorrect, and autocorrect doesn't always work. Whereas I can type almost perfectly on a keyboard and twice to three times as fast. So I think there's still a place for everything. I think maybe for some people, it depends on your needs too, right? I think for some people, they could get away with just one device and be happy. If they have low expectations of their technology, and there's someone who doesn't get as involved in technology. It's just there for, like my dad, I think, is a perfect example of this. He has his phone. He has a Google Pixel. He doesn't need it to do a lot. He spends $400 on a phone every 4 to 5 years, and he's happy because he's not pushing it to its limits. He's not doing anything more than phone calls, YouTube, some texts and emails, and that's it. And it does all those things really well. Something that came to my mind was I follow Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, and he basically said we live in a time now where doesn't matter what phone you buy, it's a good phone, pretty much. Like, give or take certain features, but like at the end of the day, if you're someone who doesn't have high expectations or high needs from a phone, you can buy basically an entry-level phone and be perfectly content. It's not, only the people like us that are going to push their devices to the limits, who want that bleeding edge, or who are going to use those pro-level features, we'll spend the extra money on that stuff. But for the average person, you don't need that $1,000 phone. You don't need that $1,500 laptop. You don't need, a lot of those things. You can be perfectly content with some of the cheaper stuff, because the cheap stuff's getting good, and the good stuff's getting cheaper.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because I mean, you can buy like a newer gen iPad for what, like $250.
Yeah.
And it's not meaningfully stripped down. It's just their 10-inch new, relatively new chip. It may not be the bleeding edge chip, but it's a newer one. And it's just their fully featured iPad experience for like $250. And if you were so inclined, you could buy a little $50 Bluetooth keyboard and make that a computer for you.
it's a netbook now.
It's a netbook now. We're right back to the same price and functionality, but the ability to decouple the keyboard And I think that's another. Tablets are just laptops where you can periodically use it without the keyboard. And that's cool. If you want to finish binging Stranger Things in bed, you're all showered up and just tired and don't want to be sitting down on the couch, like, that's great. You grab your tablet and you're good to go. There's a part of me deep down that is not joking when I say I would consider a flip phone for my next phone. And I'm not talking about like the Samsung Flip. I'm talking about like
A dumb phone.
a flip phone a dumb phone. Um, there's a broader conversation to be had there, I think, because this is going to be a little bit of a sidetrack, but I'm going to make a wild guess that you do not have a landline phone in your house.
That's a pretty safe guess.
I don't either. Neither did the friend that I went to visit in Denver. And to be honest, at this point, neither do my parents, nor his parents. Now, I'm not sure about yours.
Nope, my parents just got rid of theirs too.
This is weird, right? Because having grown up in an era where we didn't have cell phones and landline phones became our primary means of communication, prior to, maybe you have unfettered internet access, you weren't emailing your friends, you'd call them. Hey, I want to come over this weekend and invite myself over with Dr. Pepper for Halo, We now live in a world where landline phones are archaic. And there's still a place for them, like for a business or whatnot. But the idea is when I'm calling somebody on my phone, I'm calling a person. That person may not be at home. There's a lot of implicit, like if I don't carry a phone around with me at all times, then I'm the one being unreasonable. And I'm the one who's, oh, well, I was trying to get a hold of you. Why didn't you have your cell phone? But back in the day, you would call their house phone and go, oh, they must not be home. And that was just it. There's like a urgency to being connected. And there's good reason for that. Like if I'm crashed, by the side of the road somewhere and I've got a cell signal, I can call somebody to come pick me up or call AAA. There's pros to being connected. But as human beings, maybe we weren't meant to be that reachable all the time. Maybe we need some space.
I am so excited that you've come to the exact same conclusion as me. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to take away from what you're saying. I think it's just amazing that I've been feeling the exact same way recently. And I actually was doing a little bit of research, like how hard would it be to switch to some form of dumb phone while still having something to kind of give me some of the tech I need to do my job.
Right.
So I was like, oh, like maybe a internet connected iPad, like a cellular iPad or something, obviously I don't keep that in my pocket, so it doesn't. And the main reason I was thinking of it is twofold. One, it's like what you said, I'm gonna call it being on call all the time.
Yep.
It's essentially you are expected to. Just like, if I send you a text, somehow you're just supposed to stop whatever you're doing and respond. If someone sends me an email, there's a certain social expectation about when you should respond to a message. And right. I've been slowly realizing that I don't have to respond to things immediately, sometimes ever.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's one of the reasons. And two is just the fact that I'm susceptible to the algorithm and being sucked into rabbit holes of like YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels. I refuse to go on TikTok.
Yep.
Yep. And it's not even like TikTok for many reasons, but like honestly, the main reason I don't go on TikTok is just because I have an addictive personality. All the other, right. Controversies aside, it's just purely that because I know that if I got it, I'd get sucked in. But unfortunately, like, Instagram Reels are just, the filtered TikToks and Shorts are the filtered Reels. So I'm just getting the best ones, really, honestly, if I go to the other sources. But yeah, I've thought a lot about that idea of decoupling myself. And I've been trying to take steps. Like my idea is I come home and I take my phone, put it on the charger and don't have it with me when I'm with my family so that I can't respond to things. Though I do have my Apple Watch, so if it was urgent, I could, but I can't actually interact with that. I can just get notified if it's urgent, but I don't have to
And
actually do anything with it.
that is the Apple Watch fulfilling its design goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like its role in your life is to be that executive assistant who lets you know, hey, just so you know, you just got an email or a message from whoever. Do you want to respond right now? Like it's not meant to be the all-in-one solution. And so that, sorry, kind of going back to an older topic of conversation, but yeah, that's it. It's serving its purpose right there.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to use it for rather than it. Because a lot of times I have my watch and my phone at the same time, and then I'll just not use my watch. But it's kind of like, why do I have it? So I'm trying to
Yeah.
get better at that, keeping my phone out of my pocket and only using it when I need it and using it for its intended purposes. So, like, kind of almost dissecting what Apple has engineered the phone to be. Like, it's almost like Apple's trying to fuse it so it does everything, and I'm trying to literally strip away those things and let it only do the things I want it to do. And the funny thing is like, that's not like some novel concept. Like, the idea is the phone can do all these things, but we're not supposed to use it all, but we inherently feel like we need to use all the features because it's got all those features and we spend all this money. I got to get the most out of it. Whereas, like, no, you just use the bits you need, because then you don't overwhelm yourself. You don't get anxiety from like this feeling of like, oh, I've got to have this app, I got to do this, I got to do that. It's like, you don't have to. You don't have to respond to every notification. That's why I start using these focus modes now with Apple, because it's helping me not, see all the notifications too.
I've noticed sometimes I'll text you and it says Leighton has notifications silenced, and I just felt like good for you. I didn't feel like, come on, you're silencing my notifications. Like I'm important. I'm trying to talk to you. It's like, no, you're saying I'm off the clock now, and I respect it. You know what I mean? Like if I don't expect to hear back from you until the next day at that point. If then, because maybe we won't, and that's fine.
Yeah.
This is a weird question to ask. Are we reaching a point where, I mean, what would you call us? Like we've grown up as millennials in like the peak digital age. We got to see the entire arc of the very beginnings of consumer internet up through it being commonplace, the first release of the iPhone, the first release of like a graphics card. Like think of the things that have happened in our lives, and here we are having seen it all, being willing to say, hey, maybe I'm done with like the whole smartphone thing. Maybe I'm done. Maybe I want just a basic phone. Um, as absurd as it sounds, maybe there's a time and a place in the future where I would just have a landline phone and that'd be it. And if I didn't answer, you could leave a message and I'd get back to you. Um, like where do we go from here? What's really pushing us in this direction? It like we are truly the first generation to be so deeply and always connected.
I think for us, and maybe I'm going to speak for myself. I don't want to say us because I don't. I think that sometimes I think a little differently than a lot of people, and maybe I don't. Leave in the comments if you feel the same way. But we're the generation that we're old enough to actually remember before. And I mean, obviously, like, and I mean that not like, obviously our parents are also the people to remember before, but we were like at that pinnacle age where we're young enough to, we remember the stuff before, but we were also kids when it all changed. So it's such an impactful thing. Whereas like a lot of the generation now, they were just born into the internet, born into, like, Google's 25, going 26 years old. Like, so some kids, it's literally been here their whole lives. And so for us, we kind of like, there's something to remember, to go back to. It's like, okay, like I remember what it was like before this, and I kind of miss that. And I think that's kind of what draws me to it, is like, I remember flip phones, and I remember like, oh, I wanted more, and now I have it. Now it's like, it's not really what I wanted, so I kind of just want to go back. I guess then that's the question is, do you think we can go back?
I'll put it to you this way. I was born and raised on Microsoft Windows all the way back to Windows 3.1, DOS, etc. I remember DOS, waking up as a very young Mitch and sitting down and typing in, DOS commands to boot up whatever game, Red Baron or whatever I was playing. But I've been a Microsoft user my entire life. There came a point about 3 years ago where I had had enough. I think it was around the time where everything was moving to Windows 11. And I got this pop-up. And the pop-up didn't say, hey, Windows 11 is available. You can install it if you click here. The pop-up said, hey, we're installing Windows 11. Do you want to install it now or in 10 minutes? And that pop-up broke something in me where I just realized it wasn't my computer anymore. And that bugged me at a very deep and primal fundamental level. Because I've always been a bit of I don't want to say a hacker, but I like digging deep into my computers and kind of tweaking stuff. And fundamental to that is just that concept of it's your computer to kind of do with what you want. And I realized that Microsoft didn't feel the same way. And the only answer before me was, well, then maybe I don't need Microsoft. And that's a really interesting question to arrive at, because where do you go? The obvious answer is Mac, because it's there. It is a fully featured ecosystem of computing. I could have right now. I am looking down from my iPhone to the computer that's recording this podcast, that's actually recording my audio. It is a MacBook. I could have gotten an iMac, and I could have gotten, we do have iPads upstairs. I could have just gone full bore into the Mac ecosystem. But me being me, I decided to take the hard route. And I decided that I was going to divest myself from Windows and begin to be a Linux user as my daily driver and my main machine. I don't recommend that path for everyone, because it is still to this day incredibly challenging. Sometimes people say Linux is only free if you don't value your time. There's some truth to that. But my main machine now, that I do the majority of my work from, that I game from, that I do so much of my life from now, is a Linux machine. And if nothing else, I'll say this. I think that process taught me that, and it took years, bear in mind. It wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't like I just flipped a switch. It's I had to go do research. I had to figure out solutions to overcome these new obstacles, which I'm sure you can see I'm kind of relating this to the obstacles that you're going to encounter and that I will encounter when we use dumb phones instead of smartphones. Things are going to change. You're going to have to do things differently. Maybe that means, on Linux, I do gaming usually through Proton on Steam. Some games aren't compatible with that. Maybe that means you have to give some things up. Like for Linux, any game that uses certain specific anti-cheat softwares, there's no solution. You can't get those running on Linux. And I had to decide, well, is it, what do I value more? All the benefits that Linux offers, or playing these one or two games. Now, the other thing to consider is that as a game developer, I can't necessarily afford to forsake a platform entirely. So I'm in a unique position where I also have a Windows computer, and I also do development on that Windows computer, and I also play some games on that Windows computer. But I was prepared and still am. My daily driver is my Linux box. So I said all that to say, it will be a massive lifestyle shift to go from a smartphone to a dumb phone. It will throw obstacles in your path that you could not have anticipated despite your best efforts to prepare. And there will be moments where you're going to have to look at yourself in the mirror and kind of go, why am I doing this? Is it really worth it? Am I willing to let go of that thing for a better alternative? Am I willing to let go of the ability to hop on and store my boarding passes on Apple Wallet? Am I willing to, I'm going to have to print them all out now. That's something to think about. Am I willing to abandon the ability to jump on my iPhone and pull up my budget in the Numbers app and, punch in the dinner we just had? I'm going to have to, like every other person all the way back through the decades, take the receipt home and wait until I get home and then punch in the receipt into my budget.
So I guess what that just begs the question then is the technology the problem, or is it a us problem? And I mean, you could, and I say that knowing full well that technology is designed to make us hooked and addicted to it. There's studies like proven that they've used there's tactics used, but I think this is something where I mean I think we just kind of jump to the let's go to a dumb phone. It just like it's kind of like almost like a knee jerk reaction. But
to some degree,
yeah,
yes.
but the I think that it's
Stating that this computer is the last Windows computer I'd ever buy, also a knee-jerk reaction.
yeah.
You
I
know?
think it's an emotional thing. I think at the end of the day, it's about learning discipline, self control, building good habits, so that technology doesn't own you; you own it. And obviously, like your
Correct.
example with Windows is kind of more of an example of like, yeah, they definitely want to own your computer and not let you own it. But at the end of the day, I mean more from a psychological level, is
Yes.
making sure that you're not sucked into something, into this, it's up to you to make that decision. Like if it's not that device, it'll be something else. I think as humans we are still prone to distractions. Before there were smartphones, there was something else that we would burn our time
The
on.
Dorigotype.
The what?
The Dorigotype. Let me see what this is. I don't know why the word just came to me. DER.
Okay,
Daguerreotype.
you definitely have to explain this one because I don't understand it.
Photographs.
I don't know if our audio listeners or
I'm sorry. I don't know. Like I just saw this word the other day. Anyway, photographs. Like taking like pictures. Daguerreotype. Invented by Louis Daguerre. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I don't know. Maybe that was maybe that was way off track. I just got excited. I learned a new word and I wanted to use it.
okay, people who are listening, you're just gonna have to look it up because yeah.
Yeah, daguerreotype. It's not spelled the way you think.
I'm sure Google will help you.
Daguerreotype. It's just a picture. That's literally all it means is picture.
I think
anyway,
the reason I brought this up, though, that idea of like control, is it was a video I watched recently where a guy tried to do this for, I don't know if it was a year or for a month. I can't remember. It was some really long span of time where he basically got a dumb phone. He got rid of a bunch of things, and he was able to do certain things. He did find that it did improve certain things, but he also found that he was surprised how many things he's just like, yeah, this kind of just sucks. Like there are good things that come from our technology,
yes.
That we can enjoy. It's not bad to enjoy some of the benefits of technology that we have. Like we shouldn't artificially make our lives harder because somehow that'll make things better. We did things at the time because that was how you had to do it. And we've always used the things that made our life easier. Even when tractors came out and cars came out and planes came out, like you just can't say that like, oh, life was so much better before all those things existed. It's like, yeah, but we also had certain diseases and you also couldn't visit certain people and you also couldn't, like we romanticize the past. And I think that's just going to be a thing that the generations will always do. And we have to find ways to enjoy today and what we have, use the things that we have for good. It's a conscious choice. It's not something we like to make excuses. We like to blame other things. I think that's something that has become more common. Blame the iPhone, blame TikTok, it's like, no, you made the choice to install TikTok. You made the choice to buy that phone and to pick it up. Yes, of course, there's psychological things they use to entice you, but this means you have to be smarter than them and be more clever and come up with new ways. They're coming up with new ways to entice you. You have to come up with new ways to fight it. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to just go outside and touch grass.
Touch grass.
Maybe you can't where you are, but you know what I mean. The phrase is just do something outside of that. Read a book, talk to a person in person, go for a walk, pet a dog, just, if you can, if you're not, but you know what I mean? Like this, I found that when I just go outside and away from my screen for a while, it's amazing how much time you clear mind. Even meditating, and I don't mean, it doesn't have to be like some spiritual thing, just spending 5 minutes not looking at a screen, not doing anything, just sitting doing nothing. You don't even realize what that does for your brain because we don't realize how stimulated we are all the time. So finding ways to de-stimulate is probably the best thing you can do. Yes, you have a phone in your pocket. Just go for a walk. That's the new fun thing. There's a trend now going on where it's like I can't remember what they call it, but it's a dumb way of basically saying I'm walking without my phone. It's like, oh, you mean walking? It's like
You're just walking,
just walking
like, yeah.
as if they invented something new. It's like, the thing we did
Yeah.
before phones. Yeah, it's like that's what we should be doing though. Is like that's why when I go home I put my phone in the charger. Yes, I have the watch on and I do get notifications, but like I can ignore them, or I could do a dinner focus mode if I want to. And then when I'm with my family, I don't have to look at the phone. I don't have to be distracted. And it's just a conscious choice. And I think it's something and don't feel like, oh, tomorrow I just have to cold turkey this. It's like, no, baby steps, baby steps. If you have an iPhone, there's focus modes. You can put time limits on apps that you want. If you want to limit yourself, maybe you do. You can give yourself, I want to give myself an hour to do this a day. But then after that hour, it gives you notifications. You've used up your hour. Of course, you can bypass it, so you have to still like build the right habit. But that's what I think
You can,
yeah.
yeah. You can install Linux on an old laptop in your closet or on a secondary drive on your computer and just try it out. I think, like you identified, it's less about the end result, more about proving that you could adapt, proving it to yourself as much as anyone else, that you would, you gaining the knowledge and building the infrastructure you need to know in your own heart that, hey, I'm not owned by this thing. I own this thing.
Yep. Exactly. Just, and just do something creative. I mean, I'm going to wrap it up by just talking about like this podcast. I mean, again, we're kind of self-referential. We'll get a little meta sometimes, but it's something that we've started for this very reason, is we needed something in our lives, creative, social. Yeah, it's on a screen. And just because it's on a screen doesn't mean it's bad, but it's something where we're making something and pushing ourselves and learning and growing. And that's more beneficial than just consuming and using. And it's where all the depression comes from, is when we just kind of consume all the time. We don't contribute and create. So I think that's the end message here, is just don't let technology control you. You control it. Go out there, experience life, be social, be creative. And yeah, life's not terrible. Like you go outside, you realize the world isn't ending. It's like, so anyway, yep. I think that wraps things up.
Just about. I wanted to end on one particular news story though, because we've been talking about technology that's doing things maybe it shouldn't be doing, maybe technology that's too deeply entwined with too many tendrils in our lives. There's a news story that caught my attention. Homeowner baffled after washing machine uses 3.6 gigabytes of internet a day. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a smart machine at home, go make sure that it's not torrenting anything or streaming Netflix when you're not looking.
That's a botnet if I've ever heard anything.
If I've ever heard anything. And why do we need smart washing machines, right?
I don't think they're actually that smart.
No, not at all.
Well, anyway, thank you guys.
I'm Mitch.
Oh, well, that's not wrapping.
He's Leighton.
Thank you for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe, like, comment. We love feedback. We want to hear from you guys, and just continue to support us and share this with your friends. And just let us know what you'd like us to talk about. We'd love to hear your suggestions. We'll definitely take them to heart and talk about them. And we'd love to open up like a Q&A type session if you guys would leave some questions for us. So, but yep, until then, Mitch.
It's been fun. See you guys next time.
Bye-bye.